Hi, it's Wednesday, and that means it's time for another video edition of Widower Wednesday. I'm Abel Keogh, author of the book Dating a Widower, and today we are going to discuss the excuse of not changing things for the holidays because that's what the widower has always done. This is something I get often this time of year. The advice, by the way, I'm going to extend to you today extends beyond the holiday season to really any time this excuse comes up, but I'm going to focus specifically on the holidays because that's when it seems like it comes up. And here's the typical situation that I see is that a widower is in a new relationship with a girlfriend, and again, I'm talking a serious, maybe exclusive relationship here, or maybe he's engaged to someone, and the holidays are coming up, and you're making plans for the holidays, for Thanksgiving, Christmas, the special days in between, New Year's even, and and the widower says, "Well, this is what we do, right? We go see these people, we go on vacation here, we do these things," and the new woman in his life says, "Well, that's great, that sounds fun. Here's some things I do. Why don't we mix it up and do some of yours or some of mine?" Or maybe she says, maybe we can do one or two things, but why don't we make some new holiday traditions? And that's where the widower comes back and just says, "No, we're not. This is what my family's always done, and this is what we're doing." Now, if you're dating a widower who gives you an excuse that says, "This is what we've always done, we're not changing," this is a huge red flag. And the reason it's a huge red flag is because it shows his unwillingness to adapt and change. And if you know anything from my videos and my books, and that is that in order for a widower to open his heart and move on, he needs to know how to adapt and change. Organizations, this is my business background speaking here, but if you belong to an organization that can't adapt and change, they die. It's the same with relationships. Relationships change based on various circumstances, and they need to kind of adapt and change things around, or else they die as well. Personally, I'm not a fan of just doing things for tradition or just because. I honestly believe that you really need to understand the purpose and the reason behind why you're doing it. So like if you have a holiday tradition of doing something, of whether it's going to see that, I don't know, you spend Christmas Eve or Christmas Day with a family, you do these certain activities or vacations, I guess, in my mind, it can't just be because that's what we've always done. It has to be, well, what's the reason for it? Is it just because we've always done it, or is it really, this brings our family closer together? This is a good way to do this or that. And so I'm just kind of throwing it out there because, when people say, well, that's what we've always done, or this is the way it is, I'm not a fan of tradition for tradition's sake. I love traditions. Julie and I have our own traditions. I have my own traditions. So I'm not necessarily opposed to traditions, but what I'm in favor of is really having a reason behind the traditions. So let me give you some examples here about traditions, some holiday traditions that Julie and I have had and how we've had to adapt over the years and the reasons that we've adapted these traditions and changed things up a bit. When Julie and I first got married, or even when we were engaged right before we got married, that was kind of our first holiday season together. And it was just the two of us. But Julie also knew that me and Krista had some traditions of how we spent Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, wisely, she kind of said, well, we need to discuss how we're planning the holidays. And, thankfully I was kind of wise enough to say, yeah, we need to figure something out. And we figured out something to do for Thanksgiving and Christmas, to spend it with her family, my family, things like that. And that was a tradition that we kind of kept up through the first couple of years of our married life, is that we'd spend, either Thanksgiving with my family or Thanksgiving with her family, and the other holiday, Christmas with, or Christmas Eve with her family or my family. And that's how we kind of did Christmas, or that's how we did the holiday season for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. But then life changed, right? Again, life changes, things happened, and what changed in our relationship is that kids came around, right? And as more kids came, we got older, it just became harder to go, to keep up these holiday traditions. It's hard. It's one thing to pack a baby up and go see grandma and grandpa but it's something else to pack 4 or 5 kids up and go spend the holidays. Especially as kids get older, they want to, there's things that they want to do. Necessarily going to eat dinner somewhere, isn't necessarily their idea of fun. So Julie and I updated our traditions. We still tried to spend time with her family and my family, but maybe it wasn't on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day. We kind of made those days more about our family, right? And having our own traditions and spending the day together as a family and making that bond. So we weren't just doing things, we weren't just going to her parents' house or my parents' house just to go to the houses. There was a reason behind it. And when that reason no longer worked, it's like, we're still going to celebrate this thing, but we're doing it our way. And now, we've even had to adapt it more. So we have 7 kids. For those who don't know, we have 7 children, and we're learning to adapt the holidays again. Our kids are getting older, right? Our oldest actually is out of the house this year. This will be our first holiday season without our oldest child. And, it's a little bit difficult for us, but again, we're adapting to that, right? Again, we're starting to take more trips over the holidays and do things like that, because it's not just about opening presents or doing things like that. We really want family time together. Now that all of our kids are getting older, there's things that we can do now during the holidays that we couldn't do when they were babies. So we're looking at each this holiday season just a little bit differently. And if we didn't adapt to these new circumstances, the kids getting older, things like that, our relationship would have been hurt. Krista and I had our own holiday traditions, and I could have actually gone back to Julie and said, well, this is the way I've always done things, or at least, this is the way, not always, but this is the way Krista and I did things. And, to some extent, I'll be honest, it was kind of hard to break some of those traditions, but I think I understood deep down that I was starting a new life, and in order to start a new life with Julie, I had to update some of these traditions and adjust my expectations for what the holidays would look like. And the widower you're dating needs to understand the same thing. He needs to understand that you're both starting a new life together, which means that some things were going to be changed. And that doesn't mean everything needs to change, but you need to sit down and problem solve and talk this out and understand that there has to be some kind of adaptation, and that you're not there just to be inserted into his old life, right? You're not just, hey, this is great, you're here, this is what me and the late wife always did, come in, take her place and do this. That's not the purpose of this. Life goes on, life changes, and you need to adapt to those changes if the relationship is going to survive. But again, this is something you need to navigate together and figure out what makes sense for your current circumstances. I'm hesitant to go on here and say, well, you need to do A, B, and C, because every family, every circumstances is different. The way you feel about spending time with his family or the late wife's family, or you may have kids, he may have kids, you may have kids, you both may have kids, and that all kind of goes into play here. Now, if you want to schedule a coaching session, and I'm happy to sit down with one or both of you and figure out how to make this work, I'm more than happy to do that. But really, it really comes down to both of you looking at these unique circumstances, your new circumstances, and figuring out what makes sense for you and your family. But also understanding that the traditions you make today may change as the years go by. Again, if you have children now, if you're trying to blend a family, those kids grow up, it might just be the two of you in a few years, and so your holidays are going to look different. And I think that's what kind of worked. I'd say that's one of the, Julie and I did have friction, when we were trying to make this whole widower relationship work thing. But one place I would say where we didn't have friction was, again, over the holidays. I think we both kind of understood that we needed to come up with new traditions. And it wasn't just Julie sticking to her traditions or me sticking to my traditions. We both understood that there was a need to create something new that worked for our relationship and for our family. And again, it's something we're still doing. We still update our traditions as the circumstance warrant, and we don't view these, that we do certain things on certain days. We don't really view these things as static. We try to say, this is what our life looks like this year. What makes the most sense? And that's worked great. And it's worked great not only when we were first married and engaged, but when, just as the kids have come along. So anyway, again, don't accept the idea that that's what we've always done. That's not healthy for the relationship, and again, it's a red flag because it shows, in my mind, the widower either doesn't get it, or he's not willing to maybe take a step back and realize that life is different now. How can we adapt and change? And I guess the final piece of advice here is understand that you're not going to make everybody happy under these circumstances. Somebody's feelings are bound to get hurt. But again, you have to do what's best, not for the people whose feelings are going to get hurt, but for your relationship and the family that you have. And that's really what you have to do and put into consideration first. Go ahead and like this video. Share your own experience and stories by clicking below. If you want to schedule a coaching session with me, there's a link in the description below where you can do that. I'm Abel Keogh, author of the book Dating a Widower, and I'll see you next Wednesday.